declaration that they were my favorite student. Tell them it wasn't true.
Except in this case.
All right.
You just have one pair?
Yeah, I just have one pen.
So I just use the cheaters.
Yeah,
I've
you
got
got
them all over
readers.
the
I
place.
got readers everywhere because when I wear my contacts, I can't, so I have to have readers.
Yeah.
I have stashed in every pocket.
A couple weeks ago, I lost 2 pair in 1 week. I don't know what happened, whether I left them in restaurants or what. And then I ended up finding one in one of my coat pockets. So I was only down one, so I bought one.
I go to Marks and buy the industrial pack of them.
Oh. I didn't look there. I got mine at Dollar General. Okay, are we recording?
Yeah, yep, we're live on
All right,
YouTube.
oh, okay. Let's see. We'll get the right spot here.
Did you say this comes through on YouTube also?
Yeah. So the past
So you can
episodes.
catch up
With
if you
where
need
the
to.
word right would be.
What is the YouTube channel?
It's just the name of our church,
Okay,
Poland Village Baptist Church. It's really nice, actually, because there is only one Poland Village Baptist Church. So
well, good.
it is. It's very simple to find it on YouTube because it comes up pretty fast.
All right, welcome to New Testament Times as we endeavor to look at the background leading up to the coming of Jesus in his incarnation, and then also look at some background and extra information about what happened during the period of Christ's life and then subsequent to that. We've already covered essentially what happens in the book of Acts. We didn't go through the book of Acts. We talked about some of the main events that occurred in the lives of Peter and Paul. And I said that this week we would look at the other apostles. Now keep in mind that for many of these, we don't have solid evidence. We have tradition, we have stories that have come down to us. And so I can't give you a high degree of accuracy as much as I could with Peter and Paul. But it's interesting to at least see what has come down, and quite possibly these things might be true. All right, so the first disciple that we have on our notes here is Andrew. And we're told that Andrew went to what was called the land of the man-eaters. Man-eaters. We're not talking about tigers, we're talking about people.
Cannibal.
Present-day Russia. Christians there claim him as the first to bring the gospel to their land. He also preached in Asia Minor, which is modern-day Turkey, and in Greece, where he is said to have been crucified. This map shows you generally the areas where the different disciples went, if you can follow the color scheme. And some of that differs from some of the details that I'm giving you, but primarily that gives you the breakdown geographically. All right, so that's Andrew.
Real quick.
Yeah.
Why man-eaters? Cannibalism? Or
Apparently, that's what it sounds like. Or that could be a euphemism for, strong warriors who beat everybody. It's like we have mascots around here. They're not really devils. They just fight real hard. At least we hope not. All right, the next one is Thomas. He was probably most active in the area east of Syria. Tradition has him preaching as far east as India, where the ancient Marthoma Christians revere him as their founder. They claim that he died there when pierced through with the spears of 4 soldiers. That's Thomas. There is some tradition that he went even further than India, maybe as far as the Far East, China, Japan, but that's a little less clear, I guess you'd say. Next is Philip, who possibly had a powerful ministry in Carthage in North Africa. Now, we don't see that indicated here. Carthage would be right there. I think in ancient times, we talked about the wars between Carthage and Rome, which are called the Punic Wars. And Carthage is the location later, a few centuries later, of the great theologian Augustine. So, Philip possibly went to Carthage, and then also in Asia Minor. A lot of these guys crossed paths in Asia Minor. In Asia Minor, he apparently converted the wife of a Roman proconsul. And in retaliation, the proconsul had Philip arrested and cruelly put to death. Then we come to Matthew, who ministered in Persia and Ethiopia. You can see that indicated on the map. Some of the oldest reports say that he was not martyred, while others say he was stabbed to death in Ethiopia. Next is Bartholomew. He had widespread missionary travels attributed to him by tradition. It is said that he went to India with Thomas, back to Armenia, which is in between Persia and India. Oh, no, sorry, it's northwest of Persia. And also to Ethiopia and southern Arabia. This is the Arabian Peninsula. I'm sorry, over here is the Arabian Peninsula. So we're going down there. There are various accounts of how he met his death as a martyr for the gospel. Next, James, the son of Alphaeus, sometimes called the Lesser James, is one of at least 3 Jameses referred to in the New Testament. There's some confusion as to which is which, but this James is reckoned to have ministered in Syria. The Jewish historian Josephus reported that he was stoned and then clubbed to death. Although I'm not so sure that's not talking about James, the half-brother of Jesus, because that sounds like what happened to him. So sometimes when people are talking about James, it's not certain who they mean. John was the only one of the company generally thought to have died a natural death from old age, but it wasn't for lack of trying. They tried, one account is that he was put into a pot of boiling oil and survived. He was the leader of the church in the Ephesus area and is said to have taken care of Mary, the mother of Jesus, in his home. I think you have your notes there about the boiling oil. Next is Simon Zelates, or Simon the Zealot. Dorotheus, the bishop of Tyre, around AD 303, so that's a couple hundred years later, says that Simon preached Christ along the African coast before going to Britain. Some say that he ministered in Persia and was killed after refusing to sacrifice to the sun god. So either he traveled a lot or some of the stories may not be accurate. So Persia, Northern Africa, and Britain. Matthias, remember, was the apostle chosen to replace Judas Iscariot. Tradition sends him to Syria with Andrew and to death by burning. Now, there are some of the the 11 or 12, counting Matthias, that we just don't know anything about at all. So anyone I haven't mentioned, it's because there's no information. And then we come to Joseph of Arimathea. Remember, it was his tomb in which Jesus was laid. An ancient manuscript discovered in the Vatican tells of Joseph, Lazarus, Martha, and Mary landing at Marseille in AD 35. So that would be on the coast of France. I'm not sure exactly where Marseille is there. Early English historian William of Malmesbury states that, accompanied by 11 missionaries under his charge, Joseph came from France to Britain, having been sent by Philip the Apostle, and that the British king gave them Glastonbury and 12 hides of land. I don't know how big a hide is, but it's a measurement of land. All right, any questions? There's another map that someone has come up with. Might have some different people. Glance over that. Looks like pretty much the same. This one includes Spain with Paul and James.
I think one of the beauties we always want to remember is, you know, it's not Western. You know, so often our Christianity gets associated with Western civilization, and it's just not, right? It's East, it's Africa, and West, and Asia, and Europe. But Christianity is not a European construct or whatever.
It kind of appears that way because in the Bible we have the book of Acts, which moves westward in the progression from Jerusalem to Rome. And what we know of our own history comes from Europe. And Christianity, of course, gained a stronghold there. So we don't know that much about going east, but the gospel did certainly go east and south.
And south, right? I mean, there are churches in Ethiopia that have been there, 1,800 years before our country became a country or whatever, Yeah.
Yeah, the Coptic Christians, you find them in Egypt as well.
Yeah.
But in Ethiopia, the guide we had in Egypt was a Coptic Christian. That's just a tradition that goes back, I don't know, 2nd century maybe. And they were largely untouched, if you will, by what was happening in European Christianity. Anything else? All right. We're going to move now to an event that I mentioned this morning that is one of the most important events in history, let alone church history. And yet very few Christians know about it. And that is the Jewish rebellion. And I'm going to give you some of the things that will lead up to that, some of the things that occurred. I don't know that we will finish looking at it today. We'll see how that goes. All right. So, first, I forgot this one. Joseph of Arimathea. I had a slide just for him. See if it tells us anything we didn't already say. Guess not. Shows you on the map there his travels from Marseille through France to Britain, settling at Glastonbury. All right, Jewish rebellion, the Prelude. In AD 45, a Jewish prophet attempted to lead the Jews to rebel. Now that's just a little over 10 years after the death and resurrection of Jesus. 2 years later, 47, a prophet named Judas attempted a revolt against Rome. In AD 48, another prophet tried to lead a rebellion. Governor Fadus had him killed. Fadus was deposed and replaced by an evil, corrupt, ruthless new governor named Cumanus, who governed Judea from 48 to 52. So, and this is after, of course, after Pontius Pilate is removed from office and sent into exile. So it doesn't get any better for the Romans after that. In AD 48, still, Cyrus began to move toward violent resistance. AD 49, some Jews living in Rome started a riot. It's unclear whether those rioting believed that the Messiah would appear in Rome to set the Jewish people free, or if Jews were protesting against the preaching of Jesus Christ in the synagogue. The same reaction seen elsewhere. I tend to think it's probably more the latter. At that point, suspicious of any commotion that smacked of insurrection, Emperor Claudius ordered all Jews to leave Rome. All he knew was that there were some Jews that were fighting against other Jews, and his solution was just get rid of all the Jews. Everybody leave. Everybody out of the pool. Or only the Jews out of the pool, I guess it would be. This exodus took over a year, during which Jewish hatred of Claudius increased, earning him the title anti-Messiah. They called him Antichrist. And so I think that a large part of this was Christians in Rome that the Jewish leadership there were fighting against, just like they did everywhere, and tried to create problems. Many Jews emigrated to Greece, where there was open discussion about declaring war on the empire. It was in this context that the Apostle Paul met up with two of these exiles, Aquila and Priscilla, in Corinth. We find that in Acts chapter 18. I'm sure you remember that. In AD 50, a Roman soldier stood on the roof of the temple in Jerusalem, making an obscene gesture at the Jews below. This caused a riot, prompting the Roman governor to call out his troops. Some 2,000 Jews were crushed to death. Shortly thereafter, a Roman soldier burned a copy of the Torah. After much anger, petitions, and demands by the Jews, the soldier was beheaded. You can see things are building. AD 52, the Samaritans attacked some Galilean Jews who were on their way to a Jerusalem festival. Apparently, they didn't take the advice that some gave of going around Samaria. They went through and were attacked. The Galilean Jews retaliated by burning several Samaritan villages. This entire matter was brought before a Roman court in Antioch, Syria. The high priest at the same time sent all the way to Rome to ask the emperor to remove the Roman governor, Cumanus, from Israel. Cumanus's heavy-handedness, corruption, and insensitivity to the Jews could no longer be tolerated. The emperor then banished Cumanus. A man named Felix took his place as the new governor of Israel. Felix. AD 52, there were constant efforts to revolt against Rome, including an Egyptian Jew who attempted to conquer Jerusalem. Remember, it's at this time that Paul is arrested in Jerusalem, and remember the Romans who came on the scene to rescue him from the Jewish mob said, "Aren't you that Egyptian fellow that we've been looking for, leading an insurrection?" And he found out that he wasn't, but that was going on here. For the very first time since Rome had conquered Israel in 62 BC, the emperor began sending governors to Israel for short terms because of the growing unrest there. They all proved to be corrupt and inept. The worst appears to have been Cesius Gallus, who became procurator in AD 64. He not only released robbers from prison by bribery, but also shared in their booty. So they bribed him to let him out of prison. And then he said, okay, since you're out and you're robbing, I get a percentage. He desired to have war with the Jews to conceal from Caesar his corruption, acting in many ways as would encourage insurrection. Excuse me. So he's afraid Caesar will find out about his underhanded dealings. And so he wants there to be trouble with the Jews. So it kind of covers up what he's doing. All right, then we come to the Jewish war. Oh, by the way, I had the Zealots up here because Zealots are the ones that are the strongest against Rome, want to get rid of Rome, leading a lot of resistance against Rome. There was Claudius that I talked about earlier. They call him anti-Messiah. And there's Cesius Gallus. So the Jewish war technically lasts from AD 66 to 100. The beginning of the Zealot rebellion is in April AD 66. By May 66, during the term of Cesius Gallus, the Jews decided they had had enough. In response to a pagan sacrifice of a bird that was set deliberately in front of a synagogue in Caesarea as a mock sacrifice to ridicule Jews as unclean lepers, a delegation of Jews protested to Florus. They complained that he was not protecting them, even though they had given him a special gift to do so. Florus exploded at this public rebuke, fining them 17 gold talents for removing treasures from a Roman city. When he rode to Jerusalem to collect the money from the temple treasury, some zealots mocked him by going around with baskets begging for the poor, destitute Roman procurator. The next day, Florus set up his tribunal and demanded of the leaders of Jerusalem that they produce those who had reproached him. Pointing out the impossibility of such a task, they suggested that he ought, however, to provide for the peace of the nation and to take such counsels as might preserve the city for the Romans, and rather for the sake of a great number of innocent people to forgive a few that were guilty, than for the sake of a few of the wicked to put so large and good a body of men into disorder. Florus was so enraged that he then ordered Roman troops to raid the markets in Jerusalem, with the result that some 3,300 men, women, and children were slaughtered. I'm sorry, 3,600. I say 33. 3,600 men, Jewish men, women, and children were slaughtered. There were some Jewish men of the equestrian order of the Roman army. In other words, there were some Jewish men who were serving in the Roman army who quite possibly hesitated at obeying this evil command and were subsequently whipped and crucified on the following day. Judea's Jews, led in part by the intensely rebellious sect called Zealots, took up arms against the Romans in a widespread revolt. But unfortunately, they were not wholly united in their determination to topple Roman rule. Many of Jerusalem's leaders and the high priests, who had long collaborated with the Romans, counseled peace. They were opposed by the Zealots and a faction of the Zealots called the Sicarii. This latter group, with daggers concealed in their garments, assassinated Roman collaborators. Although there were movements against both Jewish and Roman leadership within Jerusalem, Josephus, the Jewish historian, says that the rebellion really began with the refusal of Eleazar, the son of the high priest Ananias, an acting governor of the temple, to offer sacrifices for any foreigners. This meant that the sacrifice on behalf of Caesar that had been offered for many years ceased. Knowing that this would cause great offense to the Romans, the Sadducees, high priests, and Pharisees acted together to assemble the people at the brazen gate of the temple, where they attempted to dissuade them from this course of action, being that it would bring sure calamity to the nation. They reasoned that foreign rulers had helped to adorn the temple, and that none presenting a sacrifice should be prevented, among other arguments. Such irritation would invite Roman aggression and would result in Jerusalem losing its privileged position, and even Jews would no longer be permitted to offer sacrifices. So they tried to reason with those that were against sacrifices for foreigners. When the innovators refused to listen to these overtures, in order to save themselves, the Jewish leadership began to prepare for coming conflict by sending ambassadors to both the Roman governor Florus and King Herod Agrippa, desiring that they would send troops to put down the sedition before it should be too hard to be subdued. So they're calling for military assistance from Rome and from Herod Agrippa to take care of these zealots before they got too strong for the sake of the nation. You know, they're willing to kill Jesus for the sake of the nation. Now they're going to kill however many zealots there are for the sake of the nation. Florus did not respond. Why? Because he didn't want to put them down before a full-scale war. He wanted there to be war, remember? And Agrippa, desiring that Jerusalem remain under Roman rule, replied that he would send 3,000 horsemen to quell any rebellion. Encouraged by this, the Jewish leadership seized the upper city, sometimes called Mount Zion. You can see it on the map here, the upper city. Can you see that from where you are? The seditious, the zealots had already seized the lower city along with the temple. You can see the temple on the map there. From these positions, each side used slings and darts against one another and sometimes engaged in hand-to-hand combat. This continued for 7 days. The Festival of Xylophory, I think is how you would say it, was the next day when all were to bring wood. Remember, the word for wood is xylos, or there's something about wood as xylon, like one of the layers around wood called the xylon. I can't remember. So and it has to do with wood. Everybody's supposed to bring wood every year to supply an unending fuel supply. It takes a lot of wood to have all those sacrifices. But the seditious, the zealots, would not allow the other side to participate. Being joined by the Sicarii, the seditious were able to drive the king's soldiers out of the upper city. The house of Ananias the high priest, the palaces of Agrippa and Bernice, and the records repository were all set ablaze. Now, you can see Herod's palace here. What else was mentioned? The records repository, I couldn't find a map that showed where it was exactly, but from what I remember in viewing a model of the city, it was, I think, down in this area, or maybe it was in this building right here even. And that's the place where all the records were kept, included genealogical records and records of debt. So the burning of the records repository brought many of the common people to the side of the insurrectionists, since the records of their debts were now destroyed. Yay! No record of it, we don't owe it. We'll join you. Interestingly, this also destroyed the genealogical records. Catch this, forever eliminating any future aspirant to messiahship from being able to claim the proper descent. Follow that? from that point on, no one could claim to be the Messiah and be able to prove it because there's no way to prove his genealogy. So God is really working here to eliminate any future prospects of someone else claiming to be Messiah. And also, as we're going to see through this whole process, at the same time, destroy any way that they could continue to keep the old covenant. So it's all going to be gone. Some of the Jewish leadership hid themselves in underground vaults, while others, including Ananias the high priest, fled with the king's soldiers to the upper palace. The next day, the seditionists attacked the garrison in Antonia. Antonia is up here. It's a fortress that Herod built higher than the temple so he could look down and make sure everything was, nobody was coming up with any rebellions against him there. And this is the fortress then. And the seditionists attacked that, besieged it for 2 days before successfully subduing it, whereupon they killed the soldiers and set the citadel on fire. They next assaulted the palace, where those within clashed with them. So the palace, down here, there's the palace. Meanwhile, Manahem, the son of Judas of Galilee, procured weapons from the previously captured Masada. We'll talk about Masada later. Have you all heard of Masada? You know something about Masada? Shake your heads one way or the other. No? Okay. Masada was a fortress built by Herod the Great down in the desert on what we call it, a table rock. And the Zelates had captured that. There were a few Romans there and got weapons from there. And then he marched back into Jerusalem with an armed guard as if he was a king. He took charge of the sedition and ordered the continued siege of the palace, which eventually fell. A high priest was discovered in an aqueduct where he and his brother were killed. Manahem became so vain over this success that he became barbarously cruel. Eleazar and his followers pointed out the hypocrisy of denying liberty when they had attacked when they attacked Rome for the same reason, and that anyone would be a better leader than Manahem. So in other words, you're attacking Rome because they won't give us freedom, but now you're killing our own people. So you're taking away freedom from people, from Jewish people. So how are you any better? Well, Manahem pompously entered the temple in royal attire, accompanied by his armored guard. Eleazar and his men attacked him with stones. Some were killed, and a few fled to Masada under the leadership of Eleazar, son of Jairus, who was a relative of Manahem. And he ruled dictatorially there. Manahem was eventually found and was tortured before being executed along with his captains. So you can see so far, not only are there the Jews rising up against Rome, they're rising up against each other. The Roman general Metilius, being under siege, appealed to Eleazar for the lives of his men on condition that they lay down their weapons. He's at the temple, or the palace. This was agreed upon and oaths given. However, when the soldiers had laid down their shields and swords and were going away, Eleazar's men violently attacked and killed them. The Romans put up no resistance, only appealing to the promises that had been given. Metilius only was saved because of his cries for mercy and promised to become a Jew and be circumcised.
What page are you on?
I don't know what your page numbers are. Yeah.
48.
48?
48.
Is that reading up?
Yeah, he's in John 15.
Yeah, I didn't put all this in there. You write down what you think is important, because I'm giving you a lot of details that are not, necessary for you to remember, but just to help you understand the flow of events here. This last instance created great sadness throughout the city, as those who were not of the sedition realized that Roman vengeance was sure and that they would be punished along with the rebels. You can imagine if this is how you're treating Roman soldiers, they surrender and then you kill them. Rome's not going to just let that go. And everybody in Jerusalem is scared about what's going to happen next. To make matters worse, this atrocity had been committed on the Sabbath. So the Zealots, who are supposedly fighting for Israel, are committing atrocities, and they're doing it on the Sabbath. Then comes some signs of the end. In April of 66, angelic armies were seen in the sky above Judea. You imagine all this going on, and you're in Jerusalem, and you look up and you see angelic armies running around up in the sky. And then priests heard voices in the unseen realm in June of 66. So they heard voices coming from nowhere in particular, or anyone in particular. When the Roman soldiers marched in their annual parade in Jerusalem, the Jews were ordered to salute them. And they did so. But when a man called for the ousting of Florus, the soldiers attacked. Jewish men hiding on the roofs of their houses rained stones down on the soldiers, and others engaged them in hand-to-hand combat. In the end, Florus and the soldiers fled to the provincial capital at Caesarea, remember, on the Mediterranean coast. With the cancellation of the temple sacrifice to the emperor, the Jewish war begins. The Zealots soon marched on Jerusalem around the time of the feast of Sukkot, Sukkot, I think you have that, and captured the Roman-built Fort Antonia and the Palace of Herod. And we've already talked about that. The high priest, we already talked about that. Because I'm drawing from a lot of different sources, sometimes I repeat myself and trying to put it together. All right, let's go next to early success. You see that in your notes? Herod Agrippa II sent several thousand horsemen to assist the leaders and priests who were occupying the upper city, while the lower city and the temple were already controlled by rebels. The insurgents scored a series of surprising victories. They drove the cavalry out of the upper city and set fire to the archives. We already talked about that. They also captured and set fire to the Antonia fortress. And by late summer, the revolutionists had taken over the whole of Jerusalem. However, they were not united. I've got some repetition of what I already told you about Menahem. All right, next, third point. Cesius Gallus, the Syrian military governor, led the crack 12th Legion, called the Thunderers, down the coast from Antioch to suppress the rebellion in Jerusalem. Miraculously, the outnumbered, undertrained Jews held off Gallus's 6,000 legionnaires and auxiliaries and forced them to retreat. While marching through the Beth Horon Pass, 20 miles north of Jerusalem, the Romans were ambushed by zealots who rained down poisoned and fire arrows for hours upon the trapped Romans, who could only wave their swords fruitlessly against their unreachable attackers hidden in the heights of the valley's cliffs. Losing several thousand men, the famous Roman legion fled by night, leaving their sacred legionary standards and heavy catapults behind. Reassured by these victories, the Jews went so far as to mint their own coins. That's when you know you're in control, if you got your own coins. I remember what I've got coming up here. Oh, okay, I've already talked about that. This is a slide I have about when the signs were appearing, chariots in the clouds. Halley's comet appeared and it looked like a sword, because a comet has a tail, but it doesn't always go behind it. And in this case, it was pointing down, looks like a sword pointing at them. And NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory says the closest approach of the comet that year was in March, immediately prior to the revolt. Christians seem to have associated this period with the warnings and admonitions of Jesus Christ in Matthew 24, because after withdrawal of Gallus and the Battle of Beth Horon, which I just read to you, a great number of people fled the city of Jerusalem, led by the Mother Church, which headed east over the Jordan River to safety in the area of Pella, Jordan. Remember, Jesus said, when you see these things happening, flee to the mountains, and that's what they did. And so when everything after this that takes place in Jerusalem, Christians are not there anymore. We already talked about that. There's the attack of Cesius Gallus. And you can see towards the bottom there where he is attacked at Beth Horon, just pretty close to Jerusalem. All right, I think we've already talked about that as well. Yep. Sorry about that. All right, so of course, word gets to Nero Caesar. He was involved in much turmoil at home with the burning of Rome 3.5 years earlier. The accusations from local mobs that he had caused it, and the subsequent scapegoating of the new sect of Christians, whom he proceeded to murder in the hundreds, probably including both the apostles Paul and Peter. When Nero heard of the defeat of Galla, he dispatched his top commander, General Titus Flavius Vespasian, to quell the rebellion. The skilled military strategist, accompanied by 3 legions of infantry, plus cavalry and engineers, advanced on Galilee first. Despite the string of fortresses that Josephus, commander of the Jewish forces in Galilee, had built there, the region fell to the Romans. So here's the campaign in Galilee. We'll recognize some of the places from the New Testament. Vespasian's troops seized the coast road next and moved inland, retaking territory after territory until by AD 68, the Romans were ready to isolate Jerusalem. This steps back and shows the by the red dotted lines and arrows, the progress of Vespasian through the countryside. Interesting, he didn't go directly to Jerusalem. So his intent was not simply to put down the rebellion, but basically to punish the whole land. Although there were zealots, throughout. Josephus was commanding a number of fortresses up in Galilee and Samaria, but Vespasian is going after all of them and focused lastly on Jerusalem. Meanwhile, Jerusalem had broken up into factions, including 20,000 Idumeans or Edomites who gained entrance into the city at the end of AD 67, leading to battles which consumed thousands of Jewish men. So in other words, the Edomites, the Idumeans, saw an opportunity with the unrest to go in and do some damage in Jerusalem. And so they came in and killed a lot of the Jewish people that were there even before the Romans got there. Nero's, let's see. Yeah. Nero's suicide on June 9th of 68 led to a temporary lull while Vespasian awaited orders. It was during this lull that many Christians that had found themselves in the city escaped. I think possibly before that, there are different opinions about this, as Jesus had directed. 3 emperors came and went before Vespasian himself was named head of the realm. He sailed for Alexandria and Rome in 70, leaving his command and the final siege of Jerusalem in the able hands of his son Titus. When Titus reached the outskirts of the city, he had 80,000 troops with him, and he would need them. Jerusalem, while not impregnable, was heavily fortified. On 3 sides, steep valleys provided natural fortifications. Troops could attack only from the north. That's the only walls that were not on the edge of a precipice of deep valleys. There, of course, there were staunch walls and towers, which created 3 lines of defense. Titus mounted a classic military siege, and after 2 weeks, Josephus records, by the way, Josephus was there now because as Vespasian went through Galilee, he defeated Josephus. Josephus gave up and basically joined the Romans. The story is that Josephus and his other leadership were the only ones left. They were in a cave or someplace, and they agreed to a suicide pact, and that they would kill one another. And Josephus was the last one and decided to forego that extreme reaction, and instead gave himself up to the Romans. So he is there when all this happens, and so when he writes from what he saw. Josephus records his troops became masters of the first wall. 5 days later, the second wall fell, and the legionnaires rushed in. But the Jews, constantly growing in numbers and greatly at an advantage through their knowledge of the streets, wounded multitudes of the enemy. The defenders' victory was short-lived. Titus sealed off the town with a 5-mile earthen wall and killed anyone caught attempting to breach it with supplies. The tactic yielded quick results. The inhabitants were soon racked by starvation and disease. Starving Jews made desperate sorties to forage for food. Thousands of them were captured by the Romans and were crucified. Thousands of corpses festered throughout the city and were tossed over the walls to the valleys below. There were some Jewish people in the city of Jerusalem that attempted to escape, especially at the very beginning. They were allowing some people through, and in order to take some of their wealth with them, they swallowed it, knowing they could retrieve it later. Well, when the Romans found out they were doing that, they were just taking any Jewish person that came through and gutting them to try to get any gems they might have. Meanwhile, in the city of Jerusalem itself, starvation was such a problem that at least on one occasion, a mother killed her own baby in order to eat it, ate half of it and was saving the other half for later. Meanwhile, the smell of the flesh cooking drew attention to some wandering men through the city who wanted something to eat, and they came upon her and discovered that she had food, and not realizing it was her baby, they took it and ate it too. So awful, awful things happened as people were just dying all around. This map shows the direction of the Roman soldiers as they came in. You can see the arrows reaching the third wall, the second wall, and getting closer to the temple, coming in toward the Antonia fortress. And already said that they breached the first wall and then the second wall. Here's a closer look at the Roman camp coming across having come across the walls up in the north. This is coming from the west now, into the upper city, as it's called, where Herod's palace was. We looked at the Zealots that captured that area earlier. On the left, you see some paintings that have been done, drawings of the destruction of the city once they get in. So within a month, the Roman troops had reached the temple. This is under the fall of Jerusalem. Jerusalem was under siege. Roman strength was irresistible. What land had escaped the Romans after all? No one had ever defeated the Romans, and these bunch of Jewish guys who are fighting with one another think they're going to do it. Fortune's favor had turned to Rome, and God was now in Italy. The legions came flooding into the temple, and neither reason nor threats could restrain their violence. Most of those killed were unarmed citizens. Around the holy altar, corpses piled up and slid in a river of blood down the steps. That was Josephus' statement. Now, Titus was a man who appreciated good architecture, and he always tried to preserve temples, buildings like that. And he did not want to destroy this magnificent edifice that had been built by Herod the Great. And he offered to spare it if only the rebels barricaded within would come outside to fight. Come out and fight like a man. Don't hide in the temple, and we won't destroy it. But the offer was refused. Instead, the Jews themselves set fire to portions of the edifice rather than let the enemy take possession. When Roman troops, against Titus's orders, continued the burning, he tried in vain to stop them. The fire caused the gold overlaying the temple to melt down into the huge stone blocks of which the walls were constructed. To get at the gold, Roman soldiers completely dismantled these blocks, some of which weighed several tons, thus fulfilling what Jesus had predicted in Matthew 24:2. Do you not see all these things? Truly I say to you, not one stone here shall be left upon another, which will not be torn down. When Jesus said that, they had to have been thinking, are you kidding me? How would it be impossible to tear all these stones down? What would cause anybody to do it? Why put forth that effort? Well, when there's gold running in the cracks, that's what happened. The entire city was razed, except for 3 staunch pillars in the northwest corner. Thus was Jerusalem and the temple destroyed by Titus after 5 months' siege on September 2nd, AD 70. Everyone in Jerusalem was killed, except those who could be sold as slaves. Josephus says that 1,197,000 were killed. Tacitus, the Roman historian, says 600,000. 97,000 were taken as slaves. The best men taken to Rome, some to serve as gladiators. And it was basically by choice of the Roman soldiers as to who would be slaves and who would not. I mean, those that were left alive, they would simply go down the row and say, you know, I think Leonard here looks pretty strong. He could be a slave. Tom, no, go ahead and kill him. And that's the way it was. They selected those that would make good slaves, and others were simply killed. Later, Titus marched triumphantly through Rome, bearing the golden menorah from the temple and parading before him hundreds of Jewish captives. And this procession was memorialized by a huge ark, the Ark of Titus, built in Rome. Actually built by his brother later. There they are, carrying off the menorah. Now, it seems to me that as I read history and read what Jesus said in Matthew 24, that they come very closely together. And especially if you look at what Josephus wrote, Josephus being there. The judgment well, according to history, and destruction of the temple. Again, looking at the heavenly phenomena, there was a star or a comet resembling a sword, or maybe the same thing. A bright light shining around the altar in the temple. There was a vision of chariots and soldiers running around among the clouds in all cities of Palestine. There was earthly phenomena, which were reported by the priests. There was quaking, there was a great noise, and the sounds of a great multitude saying, "Let us remove hence." In other words, let's get out of here. They heard this voice coming from the temple, as if, you know, from another realm. These voices saying they're leaving the temple. Oops, that's Masada. So I won't go into all the details, but if you would like to, and I can give you that information. But if you match up what Jesus says in Matthew 24 and with what Josephus says happened in AD 70, they coincide. Even sometimes Josephus uses the same terminology that Jesus did in Matthew 24. So I don't think we need to look to the future for what Jesus was predicting, because he did say this generation won't pass away until all these things are fulfilled. All right, I have a very interesting video to show you from YouTube, but it is a lot longer than what we have time left today. So we'll come back to that next week. Let's move on now to Masada, where the famous last gasp of these zealots occurs. The Romans had occupied the mountaintop fortress, which was built by Herod the Great, for 60 years. The Zealots had captured it in AD 66 and managed to hold it throughout the war. More of their group fled to Masada during Jerusalem's fall, and it was here they made their final stand. These are some drawings of Masada. Well, on the left is a picture, actual picture, and on the right you see drawings of it. Bottom right are some structures that Herod the Great built. I'll show you more detail. The trail to go up to Masada is this white zigzag you see. You see that there? That's the only way to get up there. That's what made it such a great fortress. Because if anybody wanted to attack Masada, they had to come up this trail. Well, what happens while they're coming up the trail? Well, if you're up here, you can throw rocks down on them, you can shoot arrows at them. Nobody could get up there. And so that presented a problem for the Romans. And we'll talk about what they did. This is a model at Masada, of Masada. You can see on the top of this mountain, flat mountain, there were a number of buildings built here and here around. And this was the area of Herod's palace, which included structures down the side here. Very impressive. This is a map of the area. Mostly this is the important stuff here. The northern palace is there. There are roads here. It's a large area up here. And there's the snake path gate. If you're going up that snake path, you go there. Today you can take a what do you call a tram? What would that be called? An air
Gondola.
yeah, sort of like that. There it is on top, looking out toward what's out here. What do you suppose that is? See that blue? That's the sky up here. What's that blue right there?
The Dead Sea.
The Dead Sea. Yeah. And why is it called the Dead Sea? Nothing lives in it
Salty.
or anywhere around it. Yeah, because it's so salty, full of minerals. It's an amazing place. Anybody ever been there? Yeah, you should go. In fact, let's all go.
All right.
One of the people I met on our trip suggested when I went to the Dead Sea just to walk in, and when I was no longer touching bottom, keep walking. And it was amazing. You just kept on walking, even though I wasn't touching. You're just, because you float. You can not float. And so I found it that when I was laying on my back, if I wanted to get back upright again, it was very hard. I could not get my legs down because I was floating. One of the guys in our group, who was a Navy SEAL and always was doing tough guy stuff, decided that he would do a somersault in the water. And apparently salt water rushed up into his nostrils, into his head, and it was quite painful. I saw him afterwards when he was on his way to the showers they have there, trying to wash out his nasal cavities. But that's the Dead Sea. And not only nothing live in the Dead Sea, nothing lives anywhere around it, because there's just salt and minerals all over the place. So from Masada out, there's nothing. You just what's left up at the top. There's some structures and walls there. You can see it's a large area. And on a day like we were there when it was over 100 degrees, quite warm, because there's nothing between you and the sun. Some drawings that are there to show that they did have some little pools to bathe in, ceremonial bathing probably. Cisterns, that's a cistern there. It might have been for keeping water or for grain. Herod made sure that he had provisions for a long time. So there was lots of food there. In fact, as the the Romans had surrounded Masada. A lot of the zealots that were up there would take pitchers of water and just pour it out because the Romans didn't have any water, had nowhere to get water. Got the Dead Sea. Their supplies had to come all the way from Jerusalem. And so the Jewish people up there were just mocking the Romans and showing, oh, we got all this food. Which didn't make the Romans very happy with it. You can imagine. There's a grain storage area. There's a drawing of the synagogue. And there's what's left of the synagogue. You can see one of the pillars left there and the seats around. Thought to be the oldest synagogue in the world. The seats were added by the Zealots. The bottom row reserved for the elders. So that's where I sat. Here's a scroll room where they kept all the scrolls, the Torah, etc. And I find this interesting that in the interior walls, there's still some evidence of frescoes that have been painted on the walls. House, you can see. That's part back to forget what that's called. Yeah. Well, I might have it later. That's going down the side of the mountain. Something, I think that's an entertainment area that here built. This you can see, you can still see where the Roman encampments were. This outlines where the Roman camp, one of them was. Oh yeah, that's the entertainment hall. This is the bathhouse here. Model, you see it looking at from that angle. More indications of Roman encampment here. Another Roman encampment. I took this picture because I was told that there was something here which indicated where they were getting to get water. And I couldn't see it when the person was talking about it. I thought, well, I'll take a picture and I'll see it later. I still don't see it. Just the view of the countryside, just how desolate. All right, so the Romans are out there. They're in a bad way. What are they going to do? You can't go normally up the side of the hill. You get massacred. So Flavius Silva, Judea's new procurator, came up with an ingenious plan for breaching this heretofore impregnable fortress and snuffing out the Jewish rebellion. Taking his cue from the siege of Jerusalem, he first built a wall around the base of the mountain. Then he ordered his troops to begin work on a massive earthen ramp. However, as his soldiers began working on this, bringing all this dirt and stone together to make a ramp up the side of the mountain, they found themselves exposed to flying missiles launched by the Zealots on the walls above, threatening to bring an end to the plan. Always resourceful, the Roman commander ordered for slaves to be brought down from Jerusalem to do the work of moving dirt and rock, putting those defending Masada in the difficult position of allowing the work to continue or killing their own countrymen in order to halt it. Little by little, the ramp grew until it climbed 300 feet with a platform and tower on top and reached the fortress. After 5 months, a huge iron battering ram was wheeled up the ramp and used to crush through the main wall. There's the tower they built, they put up the top and able to, it's called a siege engine, able to break through the wall. And there's looking down at the ramp. It's kind of hard to tell it's there from this angle. Inside, a second wall of timber and earth, behind which the defenders were barricaded, was set ablaze. Masada's occupants were doomed. The Romans had broken through. They set fire to the second wall and we're going to wait till the next day to complete the task. Of some 960 men, women, and children, all but 2 women and 5 children took their own lives rather than submit to the Roman captors. The 7-year war had come to an end. These 2 women and 5 children were found in a cistern by the Romans. The Romans broke through the wall and expected to have hand-to-hand combat right away. But they broke through and there's nobody there. They were shocked. Where are all these guys? And they searched and searched around, and then they found the dead bodies in families as fathers took the lives of their own families first before their own. Some look at Masada and note the bravery of those that were there. And for a long time, even the Israeli army would take their soldiers down there to inspire them. But in recent years, that has changed because they realize that suicide is not an answer. And so they don't want to extol the idea of committing suicide when you're going to be defeated. All right, so that's Masada, the final battle. Next week, we'll go back a little bit and see a video presentation of the siege and capture and destruction of Jerusalem. And then we'll look at the results of that in history. Why is that important? What happened as a result of the destruction of Jerusalem? All right, any questions about anything we talked about today? I know there's a lot of obscure details, but I hope you got an idea of how things were going. It wasn't just the Romans marched in and took over the city. A lot of things that led up to that. All right, look forward to seeing you back next week as we conclude the Jewish war on Rome.
No, thank you.